Thank you, Arikas. Thanks. This is wonderful. And thank you for the Orange County Community Scholars Program. This is great to be here. I also want to give a special thank you to Marcia Weiser, who told me all about this program and made this connection. She's wonderful. I just think it's great. And I want to thank you, Marcia. This is great. David, you want to talk about how we first met?
Sure. I'm happy to begin, and then we'll open up to discussion between you and me. First of all, before I forget, Ari, if you would, send me the link for the Eshkol Nevo program. I love his work, and I'd love to see if I can hook into that. I'd be very interested. It's worth commenting on the fact, as you mentioned, that the last place I was speaking publicly before a group and, kind of in person, face to face with meals and the like, was actually your program out there in February of 2020. I miss that kind of teaching, that kind of exchange very much. And I hope we'll be able to do it again in the future. But I've thought about your community often because that was really the transition for me. I'd like to begin, David and I discussed this, I'd like to begin by telling you the story of how David and I met one another, which was thanks to this Haggadah, and why I believe that meeting was significant. It should also set you up for an appreciation of the Haggadah. So let me begin with a little bit of background. I would imagine that I'm not too far off in guessing that some of you, like me, had experiences as we were growing up of people seeking to make the Seder current by making connections to the then more recent events of the Holocaust. And I remember I always resisted that connection. I resisted it because the story of the Exodus and the experience in Egypt, the biblical story, and the Holocaust, I felt were radically different stories. I felt that the connection had some artifice to it, that it just didn't make sense overall. And even though there were obviously significant Holocaust events, such as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, that connected to Passover and the theme of Passover, redemption and being able to leave oppression. With all of that, it had never worked for me. It may have for you. This is a very personal response, but this is part of my background. Then I began as director of the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I was asked, amongst other things, to give programs that introduced folks in the weeks, the month before Passover, to our absolutely spectacular collection of historically significant Haggadot. We've got manuscripts from Spain, from elsewhere in Europe, from the 13th, 14th century, some outstanding examples from Italy in the 15th century. But I also wanted people to appreciate that the beautiful Passover art of the past and the commentary that the art offered, and that connection is key, that art can serve as commentary, that wasn't only a thing of the past. And in my early months as director of the library, I was introduced to one of the limited edition, full-size Wolloch Haggadahs, which we have in our collection. As you can see on the screen in front of you, it's called the Pesach Haggadah, in memory of the Holocaust. And I found that that particular approach made much more sense of the connection for me than anything else, I have to say. It was also the nature of the illustration, what I felt was the brilliance of the connections that were suggested. All of this began to introduce me to new ways of thinking of this connection. So I found myself one of those years speaking to a group of women and speaking about the various Haggadahs, and I take out the Wolloch Haggadah, David Wander's Haggadah, And I begin to show it and speak about it. And before I even have a chance to hold up one of the pages, and it's a very, very large Haggadah in its original form, I saw a woman sitting in the back row smiling. So I looked up at her and I said, do you know something about this Haggadah? Because it was totally unexpected. I had already introduced it as a Haggadah in memory of the Holocaust. And she responded and says, yes, I sponsored its creation. And so, I mean, David Wander will fill in a little bit more of that for you, but I immediately said to her, oh, I love it. I have to meet the artist. And so she made the connection. David and I got together for the first time when he came to the Jewish Theological Seminary, and I brought him on a tour of an exhibit of a historical Haggadah from about 1300 Spanish manuscript, which is just magnificent. In connection to one of the illustrations there, I made reference to a song by Bob Dylan, and we've been close friends ever since, and we have studied biblical books and Hasidic stories and Talmudic stories and everything in between. And my study, with its wordiness, its focus on the word, and David's translation of the word into image has enriched my way of thinking of our tradition in ways that I cannot exaggerate. And you will see much of that in this Haggadah. David, what would you pick up?
Well, I guess I should start with the Haggadah, how it actually happened. What happened is Zygfryd Wolloch is a cousin of mine, and he married Helen Wander, and she was from Krakow, and Zygfryd Wolloch was from Lvov. And he was able to make, during the war, my cousin was able to make it over to Russia. And in Russia, he was in the camps, the work camps. And Helen Wander, she had a sister, and they were both able to get fake documents. And all the rest of the Wanders were murdered in Krakow and in the camps around Krakow. So I really have a very strong connection, a family connection to the Wolloch Haggadah. Actually, when it was later shown in Berlin, it was printed in German. And there was a man named Peter von der Ostensachen from Humboldt University. And he noticed the connection of family. For me, family was something I like to keep down. I didn't want to say, my cousin commissioned this. I was a young artist. I didn't want to talk about that much, but in Germany, I saw when they made a sign of the Wanders from Krakow, the Wollochs from Lvov, David Wander from New York. All of a sudden, it came together as a big, strong kind of family statement, and I became very proud of the fact that this is a testament to Zygfryd Wolloch and Helen Wolloch's ideas. He was an art collector. He believed very strongly that Israel had to have an art scene, and he supported Israeli artists. And he came to me and he said, I'd like you to make a Haggadah that connects the Holocaust. And I ran around finding writers and different artists, and I presented a whole presentation to him, and he said, no, you got it wrong. He said, we're going to keep the text the same in the Haggadah because I want it to be able to be used at any Seder, and you be the artist. And I was like, are you kidding? I mean, this is the Holocaust. This was quite a while ago. And I was sort of, how could I deal with this? But slowly, I warmed up to the idea. I found a calligrapher named Yonah Weinrib, Rabbi Yonah Weinrib, and together we talked about how to bring the two things together. Because Zygfryd Wolloch, we call him Ziggy, he was very smart, and this was before a lot of people did this. He said, don't change the text, but change the images and actually say whatever you want to say with your art and put it with the traditional text. And I began to call that visual midrash. And he was one of the first people who I ever heard talk about the idea. Since then, I've done many books with David Kraemer about using visual images and written images and using the art as a visual midrash. So that's kind of what this whole project is about. Yeah, that's, should we start? David,
yeah, let's begin showing
the first page, right?
Yeah.
Okay. David, would you explain what the first page then is of the Haggadah?
Yeah, so I mean, you really set it up in full. Those of you who know the Hebrew text will identify this quickly. Pesach can't happen unless you prepare for it, obviously, and before the holiday commences, you've got to go searching out in all the hidden places where the chametz, where the leaven substance might have fallen, might have been scattered. And this can be something that for children is a lot of fun. It's a wonderful game. But as you can see here, David begins to comment on the event in a way that provokes us to think, what's the association? I have to say here, before you respond, David, and I'm sure you will, that there are a variety of images in this Haggadah where when David and I went over the Haggadah for the first time, I said, you know, I see here the following comment, the following midrash. And he said, oh, no, I didn't intend that at all, which raised the question of, do artists control the meaning of what they create? And you can place me very firmly in the camp of, no, they don't.
Right.
The art means what it means, and it's more in the eyes of the beholder, but it's also worth asking the artist what he was thinking. Here, you can see the packages that are tied together. What's inside them? What will we find there? The candle is lit, but there's a lot of darkness behind it. So there's much to discover. And as we will see going forward, there's a lot to be afraid of as well. I have no idea whether David had this in mind, but chametz in the tradition represents the evil inclination. And so are we searching out the places where the evil inclination hides here, that evil that so controlled the events that are commemorated in this Haggadah? I don't know, David, whether you had that in mind, but certainly when I look at it, that's what I think of.
I'll go with that too, but what I had in mind when I made the painting was the idea that leaven was actually, we're searching leaven, we're removing that, the beautiful cakes, the cookies, the wonderful things that you can make with leaven, and we're sort of bringing it down to we're just beginning to realize we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Things were not good back then, and we're trying to remember a little bit of what it was like, even though, of course, none of us were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but in Jewish studies, in this in particular, we see ourselves, or we try to see ourselves, as we were in a horrible situation. We were slaves, and in this situation, many of us were put into camps. Many of us were put into ghettos. Many of us, we have a whole history of millions of people who were treated horribly. And what I tried to show in this picture is we're beginning to shed the easy things, the comfortable things, and we're going to now put on a jacket of somebody who was in a camp. We're now going to actually sweep up all of that leaven, and now we're going to begin to deal with the idea of what this transition in Passover is about. So that's what I did with that. Right. Shall we go to the next one?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay. Oh, okay. This is the Seder Plate, but it's the new Seder Plate. This is the Seder Plate that relates to the Shoah, the Holocaust. I immediately, what I was trying to do, I was very clear, actually, maybe I should say now. When I first took on this project, I went through thousands, truly thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures of the Shoah, pictures of concentration camps. And I knew that people come to a Seder just wanting to be there, to have a wonderful time, to have a wonderful meal, to be with family, to be with friends, to rejoice. And I thought, how is this going to work with pictures of people starving, with pictures of burnt people, all the images that I was looking at? And I decided the way I could deal with this was to do it through symbols. Because actually in a Seder, in a service, the symbols, there's more. there's horosis, there's sweetness, there's bitterness, there's different things that we have from way back, from when we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, when we tell that story. But these I tried to bring a little bit, to connect it a little bit to the Holocaust. And when I talk about Morer on this plate, I put it in the center, and I put it as the yellow stars that we had to wear. And the Haroset was the bricks for the pyramids. I put that remembering the Jews who had to make the walls in Warsaw, in the Warsaw Ghetto, and the simple bricks that were done. So I tried to bring this, and actually, if you can see, it's kind of it's made into the flag of Israel. It's you can see with the two stripes up and on the top and the bottom, and I used that, and you'll see through the Haggadah that slowly the flag of Israel becomes apparent. But in the beginning, you just sort of see shadows of it, images of it. And in the background, I used the suit of the concentration camp. You can see that, to me, represented the matzah. So you're going to see that also transform in the book. David, any?
Yeah, it's rather a shocking replication of the flag of Israel, to be sure. This was actually the image that you and I were looking at when we realized that the question of the artist's intent was central to the way this is viewed. Because, I mean, first of all, I love the way you've created this Seder plate with all of the images, some of them quite direct, the egg, the matzah. When I look at it, I see the afikomen, the broken matzah, and that brokenness really has multiple meanings for me in the context of this Haggadah. But more than anything else, we were discussing the juxtaposition of the karpas, the greens, and the chazeret, which is, of course, also greens. It's different forms of the same thing originally. When we go back to the rabbinic foundation of the Haggadah, the karpas and the chazeret are literally the same thing. But here you've got branches that are productive, green, recollection of spring, as we often think about it. But then for the chazeret, you've got barren branches. And
thorny branches. Thorny branches.
Yeah, thorny branches, right? Even better. And that shocked me, I remember. And I raised that, and I interpreted that as all of the many who lost their lives in the Holocaust and were able to bear no fruit. They weren't productive, as in the green in the karpas, but they were barren because they were murdered. And I remember you're saying, no, I didn't think about that at all.
Absolutely.
Right? And I said to you, it doesn't matter. It's there.
Right. This will happen quite a bit through the Haggadah as we go. Let's do the next one.
Let's go.
Right. Okay, on this one, I just want to say the book that the traditional Haggadah, we go from slavery to freedom. And in the book, what I did was I started with the 4 cups, and I started with the first cup is tarnished and it's old. And as we come down with the 4 cups, it gets more polished. As we tell the story, we shine it a little bit more. There's a little bit more green. There comes out that in the end, there's a feeling of rebirth and spring. But it starts with a cup that's off somewhere, that's been tarnished, and nobody knows it, and nobody knows its story. But as we tell in the Haggadah, we start with the first cup, and it's a promise that we're not going to be left, that we're going to be taken care of, and that we are going to have a transformation. And this is the 4 cups in the Haggadah, and that's the first one it starts with. David, should we do this?
Let's go to the next one. I have nothing to add to that.
Great. This one is where you dip the karpas in salt water, and I used drippings of blood. Frequently, I'll use packages that are tied with red string to represent. There's a couple of references, but usually to represent bodies. And frequently I'll use red ribbon on a package to represent children who were dressed up for this train ride that people didn't know where it was going to. So this is a reference that you'll see throughout the Haggadah. Let's go to the next one. We'll go a little further. Okay, David, you want to go or should I go on this?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the Bread of Affliction. This is where we introduce the matzah, and this is where this Bread of Affliction becomes the yellow star that we're wearing. It's the bread of a poor person, a slave. It really is, suddenly it sets the tone that this is not a pretty story. It's going to get better, but in the beginning we think about this is the Bread of Affliction from Egypt, and then there's a yellow star on it, and there's the affliction that we had recently, and then on the bottom, Horan, I have that in a rainbow, and it represents, you know, that Hashem said, you know, wasn't going to destroy all of us, all of it completely. No, this wasn't going to happen after the flood, that there was going to be rebirth, that we weren't going to be completely wiped out. So that's why I put that on the bottom in a rainbow. David, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I remember going through it the first couple of times, and not knowing which direction this Haggadah was going to go, actually. You know, I didn't know how the images would work. I didn't know what the associations would be. And when I saw this matzah, and it really stands out the way Halach Ma'anya does in a traditional Haggadah. If we go back to manuscripts, or if we go back to printed Haggadahs for the first many centuries of the printing of Haggadahs, Halach Ma'anya is really where it all begins. What comes before it is rituals, but here you've got the beginning of a story, questioning and responses. It appears always very, very large on the page. And I'm going to guess that you didn't know that when you created this image. But am I wrong?
No, I sort of knew this was going to lead into the four sons, the question.
Yeah. But just the size of it could almost be the opening panel of an illuminated manuscript Haggadah. Right. But it's so appropriate just above the Manishtana, because you're at the point of question, right? But actually in this Haggadah, you're at the point of questioning the questions. What direction is it going to go? How are questions raised? Right, the multiple levels of deep question, literally, as each and every page follows as we go forward. So why don't we go to the next one and see how that becomes more complicated?
All right. Okay, so these are the four sons, and like I said, that I didn't want to use images of people in it. So what I used was a book. And this page is a little strange, because I had meant for each book to represent a son, but this has been shown in many large seders that had happened. It's been printed many times in the anthologies of art of the Haggadah. It's really been printed a lot, and I meant it. This goes back to David's comment. I meant it to be one thing in particular, and there's reasons why I chose it. But so many people have had different interpretations of this page in particular, that I really welcome whatever they are. Somebody from a school just used this for their students to talk about what it meant, and they all had these really interesting ideas about what these four sons were. Now we know one's a wise, one's a wicked, one is a simple, and one doesn't know how to ask, doesn't know to ask, and here is represented in the book. You can decide which you think the wise son is. I myself have my own take on it, but everybody's point of view is valid on this one. I've heard a lot, which wasn't my idea, but I've heard quite a bit that the book on fire was the wise son. Now that and the simple one was the one who could read the Hebrew, and it was just Hebrew on a page. You know, there's different takes on this. What I do like is I meant the burning book to be connected to the book burning in Germany in the beginning of the Nazi reign to power. But I had a student who said to me, you know, you might say that, and I get it, but what it seems like is the entire Haggadah is illuminated by the book burner. And that's actually what you're doing to the Haggadah. And I thought, Ruvi Pignon, you're a genius. I love what you say. So yeah, whatever people's take is on it is absolutely fine. Myself, if you want to know my view on this, I was always terrible at reading. I was always nervous sitting at a table wondering when I would have to read the next passage. And for me, the wise one was the one who could read. The wicked one was the one who burnt the books. The simple one was like me looking at the page and it all went blank. And the one who didn't know how to ask didn't really care about opening the book at all. And they just didn't touch it. So that was my take. But there's a lot of different versions.
Yeah, I mean, this is there's a reason it's been reproduced often, because it is an absolutely fantastic image and fantastic take on the four children. I think that what you just commented, the beauty of art, the power of art, is that it can mean multiple things to multiple people, and its meaning can change over time, kind of like the Torah, according to the Midrash, right? That the words of Torah mean different things to different people, and of course, through interpretation, its meaning can change over time. I would only add, I mean, the book on fire is maybe the most striking of these, although closed book as a metaphor has interesting connotations in our culture as well. But focusing on the burning book, in traditional Haggadahs, first of all, the earliest illustrated Haggadahs, manuscript and print, the first illustrations we have pertain to the four sons. So, we can learn, what did they think of as wise? What did they think of as wicked? Going back for centuries and centuries. In traditional illustrations, wise always connected to book and book learning. And so to me, that was the obvious association for your open book with the Hebrew words. Interestingly, in those same Haggadahs, the wicked son was always represented as a man of war. In other words, wickedness was equated with violence. And so even though we can find positive connotations of words on fire in Kabbalah, there are Kabbalistic traditions that speak of the Torah's words as words on fire. But when I look at this, I have the association to that violence, and knowing that this is a Haggadah in memory of the Holocaust, the violence of the burning, not only of books, but of people, I can't escape that here.
Right now also, this has also been called we've been called the people of the book. So people have made that reference to this drawing.
Sure.
That we are the people of the book. And there is an idea that those four sons that we talk about, or four daughters that we talk about, are in each one of us. Mm-hmm. That we do have a little bit of the wise, the wicked, the simple. We all are a combination of all this. And yeah, that's this page. Let's see. Right. Shall we go to the next?
Yes, let's go on.
Okay. Oh yeah. This one, this is called "And We Built Great Cities for Pharaoh." For some reason, I was looking at all of these pictures, and a lot of the pictures of when the trains first came into Auschwitz, where they took the suitcases from the people and they formed these piles, which were huge. I mean, they if you ever get it to see the camps, they have piles of eyeglasses, piles of prosthetic legs and arms, piles of suitcases. There were just so many people that were sent through this system that they formed these sort of pyramid shapes. And when I was looking at that, when I was thinking about it, it was like, yeah, maybe we built these pyramids in Egypt, and maybe these are connected to the pyramids that were actually the result of what was putting the people through the system, this Auschwitz system, this killing system. So that's why I made the connection with building the great cities for Pharaoh. So that is.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think I may have shared this with you in one of our past discussions, maybe our first of this. This reminds me of the exhibition in the hall at the Ellis Island Museum of baggage that immigrants, but refugees, brought with them from all over the world, and more than anything else, Jewish and Italian. Humans have been refugees, right, and experienced that over and over and over again. And we live in a world today where, again, people are hoping to travel on trains without being attacked.
Yeah.
The violence that's represented by leftover suitcases is hard to not to appreciate its immediate relevance to the world in which we live.
Right. Wonderful. Yeah. Shall we go? Let's
Mhm.
Okay. For not only one has risen up against us, in every generation there are ones who have risen up to destroy us, but the Holy One delivers us from their hands. On this one, what I tried to show, well, there are times in the book, I haven't put in all the drawings of it, but there are times where I show the smoke from the crematorium, and the smoke from the crematorium blocks out the sky above it, blocks out all belief that there's something other than what's actually going on there. What I also realized when I was doing this getting ready for the book was Egypt used the eagle a lot in their symbolism, and the Nazis used the eagle a lot in their symbolism. So what I did was I made this Red Sea, and this Red Sea was the blood around the crematoriums and the barracks, and it's split. It's also split with the pyramids, and as it splits, as you walk through that Red Sea that split, you're heading towards Sinai. And what we have there is the giving of the Ten Commandments of the Torah on Sinai, and that's it all splits, and there's a walkway for us to walk, but it's clear that in every generation, and I think this is, I tried to show the Egyptian and the what happened in the Shoah to be just part of things that have risen against us.
Yeah, this is one of the most influential parts of the Haggadah. I think that as Jews have recited this through the ages, it has reminded them of their own or recent generations, as it does in this Haggadah. The only thing I want to point out, and you've done this, my guess is unintentionally, but maybe I'm wrong, in the calligraphy of it, was that yours or Yonah's? The emphasis on God's always saving Israel. Ironically, in the discussion of the enemies that arise, right, the text itself says, yes, there are enemies that arise, but God always cares for us. In an age where many believe less in such a God, this is more complicated, but this captures the traditional spirit of this quite well.
Right. I wanted to also say that, somebody might ask and say, well, how do you come off speaking about the Holocaust? How do you come off, you weren't there, you don't know? In this book, it sort of says for us to imagine as if we were in Egypt, if we were slaves there, if we were where whatever happened over the generations, we were there, and that we have to see as if we came through it and came on to freedom. So the Inquisition, the Shoah, that we were there, we have to imagine that it went from Mitzrayim, the tight spaces, the horror, to something much more liberating and free. So this sort of invites us to make that walk to Sinai right down the middle there.
Right.
And that's what that's about. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thanks. Let's try the next one. Let's go to the next one. This one, David, you want to do this one, or should I?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, this one this is a really little bit of a tough one. There's a, it talks in the Haggadah about how we did wonderfully in Goshen, how we had lots of kids and we had a lot of money and we did wonderfully, and we really, we flourished, and we thought, oh, this is our land, this is where we're going to be, and we have very little roots here. You could see that all the little plants that are all in line have these very thin little roots. And there's a midrash that when we thought we were going to be safe in Goshen, or maybe when we thought we were going to be safe in Germany, or when we thought wherever, that you have to remember that there, and you'll see hopefully we'll get to the drawing at the end, that there is a place where we go where the roots are firmly in the ground. But this one deals with the midrash that that although we thought we were doing great, there was so many of us, we really didn't have roots in Egypt, and actually we were thought that we were in time of war, we were going to join the enemies, so we were turned into slaves in a second, like in a generation. we were turned into slaves. So this is what this piece is about.
Let's go ahead. I want to make sure that people have a chance to see as many.
I don't know. I think we should go. Maybe we should pass.
Well, this is important. You should comment on the hands here.
Please go. You want to go for it?
Well, you explained it to me, but I think, I mean, you've already commented on the fact that following a more literal reading of the commandment from the 10 Commandments that forbids images of creatures, including humans, but not only humans, how in a literal reading of that, interesting for an artist, I might say, David, because Jewish artists through the ages have totally ignored that commandment. But you chose this as a time to observe it. But that doesn't mean that you can't capture human images, because you've done it here in negative space.
Right.
And, you know, as Israel cries out, we cried out to the God of our ancestors, we can see that crying in those hands as they are raised plaintively.
And in this drawing, for me, in the story, there was a moment where the men and the women were just so exhausted, and there was, it looked as if there were going to be no more children. It looked as if it was the end. And at that point, God says, "Oh, okay, wait a second. This is going to stop."
Oops.
What happened? Did you?
I don't know if you froze or somebody else.
I still have it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so what I have here are the hands, and the gas is made in the negative space around the hands, and you could see the numbers on the arms. I don't know if you look carefully, but the only things that makes these people different from each other is the numbers, not faces, not anything. But here you see that, yeah, like it says, phantom-like hands were the only known by numbers, grasping for the last breath of life. And that's what I have here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's go on.
Let's go ahead.
All right, we're gonna have to move a little quicker.
Yeah.
Blood, fire, and pillars of smoke. This makes me think about because things happened to the Egyptians. Later on, we'll have less wine in our glasses. We don't rejoice in what happened to them. And in fact, we know a little bit about blood, fire, and pillars of smoke, because what I have here is it represents the Shoah. This represents the crematorium. This represents the gas chambers. So this is a reference there.
Yeah, but it doesn't represent only that. I'm sure I've told you this story, David. In the last year of my father's life, I was very excited about the notion of expressing ourselves in connection to the Seder through art, but I am relatively traditional. And so I didn't literally want to use paint and the like. So I got us, good pieces of heavy paper, distributed it to members of my family at the Seder, and said, use anything you want at the table to draw an image that is evocative of these words and their combination for you. And so different people at the table took from the wine and the charoset, and from literally, I mean, they created art out of food on paper. And my father drew an image using the wine and some other things of kind of a body, right, in negative space, and the smoke coming above it. And those of us who saw it realized that he was expressing his own recognition that his life was coming to an end. So these can be, historical Jewish references, but the same symbols can also have very, very personal resonance.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next. Yeah, this one, where you dip your pinky, or you put a spoon, depending on what custom you're used to, and lessen the amount of wine in your glass. This is the dropping of the wine. Of course, in this situation, I sort of mixed a color that looked like dried blood, and did that on this page. Yeah, that's and then these are the 10 plagues that you recite.
Yeah, it always does. By the way, we've got bloodstains like this on manuscripts that go back to 1300, 1400. You
We
know,
have wine stains like this on manuscript?
just like this, because
Wow.
all of those beautiful illustrated Haggadahs, illuminated, were used. So if we want to know what kind of wine they were drinking at the
Right.
Seder, we could actually test for it.
Right, beautiful. That's great. Oh, let's see if we can keep going. Okay, this one says, you know, you have to mention these three things at the Seder to do, which is Pesach, Matzah, and Moror. I put them together, where I put the Pesach would be the drops of blood, the Matzah would be the suits, and the Moror is the white, the yellow star that people were forced to wear. I put them together in the symbols.
And they really are one image, aren't they? They really do belong
It
together.
comes out as one image, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, beautiful. Should we go to the next? All right, in this one, we spoke a little bit about this before, that that it says in every generation, you're obligated to see as if you actually left Egypt. In this one, I thought that in every generation, you have to feel as if you went through the Shoah also. That, so I also, this is my own commentary. You might see that there's only one triangle, yellow triangle on that suit. The Nazis used a triangle demarcation system, whereas if a person was a communist, they would give them a red triangle, and if it was a Jewish communist, it would be a yellow triangle on a red triangle. They figured all this stuff out, and in the beginning they had used this, and then later on the killing was so wholesale that it wasn't even used very much. But you know, this is one where I tried to show the martyrdom of the amount of people that were killed, and that actually this asks us all to put on the suit and just kind of like feel for a second what it's like at a Seder of mine. My brother's wife's father went through the camps, and when he looked at this, he just like blurted out quickly. He said, "My number was 28295, my father's number was 28296, and my brother was 28297. And you could see that they all stood in line as they were going into the system. But at our table, there he was. So it's, I mean, we're losing a lot of the people who were actually there, but the memory of it, we really have to keep alive. Should we?
Yeah, let's go on. You said everything on that.
This one, the Red Sea, there's bits of swastikas, bits of pyramids in there. We can just kind of go past that. All right. Yeah. Do you want, David?
Yeah, this is actually very special, this page, because it marks an important part in the Seder. If you pay attention, I mean, if you were looking carefully here, but if you go to your own Haggadahs, you'll find that the pouring of the second cup of wine comes immediately before the four questions. Originally, if we go back to rabbinic sources, that's where the second cup of wine was mixed. Back in Greco-Roman times, they diluted wine with water, and it was an important ritual, mixing it together. When the wine and water were mixed at the Seder table, right after Halach Ma'anya and just before the four questions, the whole point was to offer another provocation to questioning. That's why you've got the four questions immediately after that. Once that cup is poured and the questions are asked and the story begins to be recited, that cup requires a blessing, right? You can't pour a cup of wine at a Jewish ritual event without a blessing, and yet there it is sitting without any blessing at all. We come to the end, we've told the story. It's the story of what? Yes, there are plagues here, there is suffering here, but it ends emphatically with a blessing for wine, sure, but what comes before the blessing for wine, and you've got it right on this page, is Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. It's the blessing for God's redemption of Israel. And that's what this blessing says, that, you know, as we saw earlier, God will intervene to redeem us, whoever the tyrants may be, who will oppress us. And what you've offered at the top beautifully is a succession of images. You can say more on that succession, but the succession, reading in the order of the Hebrew from right to left, clearly leads in the narrative offered here to the redemption that is represented by the state of Israel.
Great. Yeah, I quickly, to do this, I found a cloth that was designed around the Bauhaus time of how to make these yellow stars be as efficient as possible. That was one. Then the yellow star turns into a yellow star in a concentration camp suit. And then that star transforms into the Mogan David of Israel. So it was just this image is called the transformation of a star. And that's what that is. So I guess we should keep going.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, this one now deals with the moror. When you eat the moror and the bitter herb, I made that moror that we saw in the beginning. The yellow star now turns into the words that's in the same pattern of the yellow star, but it's caught in the barbed wire. It's actually and then what I also had yuds, which represent God's name, which were prayers that were also stuck in the barbed wire. So you can see these different little yuds stuck up there. And then we begin to eat the sandwiches, and then we begin with the meal. So that's what we have here. David, you want to?
Yeah, so I guess what we find on this page is they oppressed us, we won, let's eat, right?
That's basically what that was. You're right.
Yeah, okay, good. Let's go ahead.
Right, good. And this one, so this again is with the children that were wrapped up in beautiful clothing, and then they are put in with the concentration camp suits of black and white, and then there's a fire. And this one I called "They Came by Trains and Left on the Wing of an Angel." And this is actually, because it's the Afikomen and we're looking for it, this is basically a piece of artwork that's a testimony to the children that were killed in the camps, and all of us, but also to the children.
Yeah, to me, David, this goes back to the hiddenness that I saw, but you did not admit to on the first page for when we were searching for chametz. I think that one of the beautiful qualities of this Haggadah is that when all of this is represented in images, as much as images reveal, because we see a lot, the meaning of images is often not obvious. So the images both reveal and conceal. There's something hidden here, and that's the tzafun. The afikomen is something that's been hidden and now revealed. And what I like about we make it into a game, but what I like about the ritual is that it discovers the hidden, and that hidden is then brought by whoever the child is to negotiate its meaning. How much is it worth? There's all kinds of revealing the hidden in this simple ritual, and we don't often enough appreciate it. Your images have really captured that.
Thank you for everything. Okay, this one I use, I love this. The Lord will make us the chief cornerstone, and it's the cornerstone that's despised by the builder will be our chief cornerstone. This is actually all the bodies, the black and white, and then from it comes a ladder. And it's actually the fact that we were told that we were useless. I mean, 6 million people who were actually so wonderful, who were killed in this. And then from that, we have a ladder that reaches up. So that's what I wanted to represent with that.
Let's go forward quickly because we have to leave time for some questions. Go ahead.
This is Elijah's door. You remember in the beginning where I had the books, the different books, one was on fire, one was open, one was closed. These are all the books thrown all over. I always thought about if there was a Seder in a town that was burning back in that time, would you really open up the door for Elijah? And what I have is the door being kicked in, the entire room a mess, the books thrown everywhere, the city on fire. There's still blood on the doorposts of the house, but the only thing that's steady there is Elijah's chair and Elijah's cup, which is suspended in the air. And what I have is the belief that Elijah will actually come through that door and bring on the Messiah, will be there throughout all the Seders, throughout the years. That's what this cup in the air represents. So that's the opening the door for Elijah. Should we keep going? Because we want to try to get to the end. Okay, this one, Zygfryd Wolloch. asked for one thing in the Haggadah. He said, you can do whatever artwork you want to. The only thing is, I want you to put in forget-me-not flowers. I'm not sure what that meant to him, but he really wanted that. And these blue flowers are forget-me-not flowers. They're holding the luchot on the top there. And you can see the cup now, the fourth cup is polished, and there it's reflecting the green. That's actually the rebirth. And this is the page before the last page, I think. Perfect. If you could do the last page.
Yeah, let's go.
Yes, and this is L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim. This is, you could see here, all of the grapes that come from the vine now have roots in the land. And you could see that the roots are so thick that they're just coming out of, and here it is where we say, you know, next year in Jerusalem. And this is basically the end of the story, the Haggadah story. We're brought back to the land of Israel. And in this case, it is next year in Jerusalem.
Yeah. So the only thing I want to add here, David, is that the decoration on this page really brings us back to the decoration of Haggadah manuscripts in centuries past. The most beautiful pages are often the growth, the flowering, green in intricate dance with one another, and that's exactly what we've got here.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah. And then Mr. Wolloch wanted 3 songs added at the end of this Haggadah. So I think we have Anima Amin, which is I used the triangle as the strongest geometric element, and if you put one on top of the other, you would get the Mogen David. So it was the pyramids, and it was also the yellow triangle that was put on the suits, and the background being and the next one is Brent, which is the shtetl burning, but many times Jewish people were thrown into the synagogue, and then the synagogues were set on fire. So this is an example of a sort of homage to that. And the last one is the partisan song, which I made the tree as a menorah. And the menorah was on fire, and that was the strength of the partisans fighting back. So that pretty much ends the Haggadah.
And of course, it's essential to say that the bush will never be consumed.
Right. Okay.
So Ari, why don't we take questions or comments?
Yeah, people have been submitting comments. We have just a few minutes, so let me go through them as quick as possible. Number one, people have asked, how long did it take you, David Wander, to make the Haggadah from when you started to finished?
Start to finish. Hi, Marcia. Start to finish took 4 years. It and then there was a show at Yad Vashem. It was printed in Jerusalem at the Burston Graphic Center as a silkscreen edition, and then it was actually reprinted in German in Berlin about 10 years ago. Yeah. But it took 4 years to put the whole thing together.
I did look online to see how I get a copy, and I think they're not really available, and they're very expensive. So Rochelle wants to know, how does she get her copy?
It's really out of print. I think you have to look at Etsy, or you have to go, I think Amazon, you could find something. There are 2 versions. There's one that was a silkscreen, large 15 by 20 book that's in a clamshell box, and each page is separate. That one is, it's for the thousands. That one is in a lot of museums and libraries around the world. Then there's also a Seder.
How many of those did you create? That was limited edition.
350, I think it was 350.
Okay.
And then there is a Haggadah that you can use at a Seder table, but it's a little tough to get one of those. But I think you can find it. Yeah.
Barbara asked a question which you did not really get to, is the choice of the Hebrew script and font, the person who was the calligraphy. So yes. Was it hard to find someone that you wanted? Because I was looking at the calligraphy and it really did match. It's something about the calligraphy matched what you were getting across in the art. So was it hard to find a calligrapher? Is there anything we should think about when we look at the calligraphy in the Haggadah?
I have to say that Yonah Weinrib is an unbelievable artist and calligrapher. He works in a certain style, but after this, he's gone on to illustrate so many books. He's an amazing calligrapher. I just love the way his letters look. And I would lay out the page, and then he would write the calligraphy. and then I would put in the artwork. So just because it would be horrible if I did the artwork and then the calligraphy, there was a mistake, whatever. It worked better, but he is an amazing artist in his own right. And this book was made a long time ago, maybe 20, 40 years ago, something like that. So we still stayed friends. You might want to look up his work. He's incredible. Yonah Weinrib.
I'll try to look it up. Herb says he was able to get a copy of it.
Oh, really?
And how beautiful it is. So.
That's great. How'd you get it?
Herb, you can text. How did you get a copy of it? So Keith asks about the art. Now, we haven't talked about your other art, but I guess his question is, have you used any of these images that you showed us for the Haggadah in other artworks, or is it really only for this Haggadah that you've used these
mostly
images?
Only for this Haggadah, but actually David didn't mention this, but when I met with him, I had said to him, I really want to do the 5 Megillot. Do you know anybody who would be a good teacher to work with? And he gave me a list of, I don't know, maybe 10 people to look up. And I looked at the list, and then I looked up at him and I said, no, I want to work with you. And he actually agreed at that moment on like the first meeting. I mean, it was, and that was maybe 12 years ago of study and artwork and friendship. And, but that's, we've done so many books, but.
Yeah, it was more than that, actually.
Yeah, maybe it's more than that.
You're trying to make your life shorter.
Exactly. I want to be younger, but yeah, it's a long time ago. But usually I'll look at a book and I'll think, how is the best way to translate it? How is the best way to represent it? Some books I'll do in black and white. Some books I'll do only in reds. I think the Shir Shirim I did in mostly reds. But I'll work. I mean, I talk with my study partner, and we really talk about how does the book work? What does it feel like? What does it feel like to open up the page? What do you want to see? We talk a lot about the projects, and David goes, okay, when we finish one, it goes, okay, what do you want to study now? And we've gone through Hasidic stories. We've gone through so many different texts, and we're still working. We're still going. Yeah.
Can people buy your art, by the way, as like standalone pieces, or they? Or
sure. I mean, I have
books?
a website. They can look at that. They certainly can see anything there. They can write to me. It's davidwanderart.com. Yeah, you can do that.
I'll share the email afterwards. So let's see. Last two questions. Well, first of all, I would say not many of us would want to use a Holocaust Haggadah. It really is a downer. I mean, it's just.
Tell me about it.
We all go into Pesach with Egypt, and it's a really upper. But I guess what you did show me is that they really are. I mean, Egypt was a horrific place. I mean, it really. But we're just we're how many thousands of years separated from it. So I think we can forget the pain and use it for the message of freedom. And maybe we're too close to the Holocaust. And it's so, but I think you have shown, both you and David Kraemer have shown really the connections. And so I want to thank you both for this great program and what you've done with the art. And it'll make us all, those of us online, will think differently, I would say. And maybe we'll think differently about Egypt, because Egypt was pretty bad. I mean, it was good, but it was bad, which is the story of the Jews of Eastern Europe, and particularly
But what
Germany.
you said is very important, which is that following the events, at least, we were like that image of David Wander's, where we were able to look through the sea and recognize that on the other side was something far more promising.
Thank you. Yeah.
So my last question, aside from this Haggadah, I want each of you to tell me, what's your favorite Haggadah for Pesach? What will you be using this Pesach? So David Kraemer, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about this Haggadah is not I wouldn't use it as a Haggadah at a Seder either, although I would use particular pieces of it for reasons that you said and others. I want the most basic, most traditional Haggadah I can find. I don't want any commentary because I'd like people at my Seder, including me, but not only me, to be able to offer the commentary, to ask the questions. I don't want someone else stepping in and giving us the voice that they think we should have, or the thoughts that they think we should have. So I actually use an art scroll family Haggadah, not because of my traditionality. It's not that kind of traditionality, but because it's the most basic traditional Haggadah I could find.
Great. And David Wander, what about you? What are you
Well,
using?
actually, we use the Holocaust Haggadah, and I've been using it for about 35, 40 years now. And the nice thing that we do is we save the pages in the end for whoever is going to be at the Seder, writes a little something. And over the years, you get to see different things of how people felt, you know, children growing up, all sorts of things. But it's always nice to like look through the Haggadahs. You never know which one you're going to get because they're all passed out. But then you could, you know, passed out around the table. But you can look at all the different things that people said. So yeah, we've been using my Haggadah. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I said that was last question. Actually, I had one more question. So I understand that you're a teacher at SAR, which is a very elite Jewish day school in Riverdale, I believe. Yes. And my friend, Rabbi Charlie Salvanor's son, is one of your students in art class. Right. So my question was, do you teach this Haggadah to kids? Have you used it at all in the school, or is it something that you don't use?
No, I usually, it's funny, you know what, I usually don't show my work that much to the kids because I really want to encourage them to do their own personal work. That Four Sons thing gets talked about in the Jewish studies class because it kind of is in a whole lot of books. But for the most part, I love teaching, and that's an amazing school, and they really support the arts. So I really try to encourage them. And every year we do a different book with artwork. So this year we're doing the story of Yonah. Last year we did a bencher. The year before that, I think maybe a couple of years before that, we did a Mincha book. So every year we do a book that has artwork from the kids in it. And we have that class is taught by me and a Jewish studies teacher, much like David Kraemer and myself. You know, we teach a class like that. So yeah, if I can give the biggest plug to SAR, let me please do that. They're incredible. And I've been there a long time now. Yeah, a while.
Well, thank you both for sharing this project with us. And I hope David Wander, you get paid every time someone uses that image from the Four Sons.
No, it never happens that way, but thank you.
Boy, because that is an image I probably most of us have actually seen, but we didn't know it was you.
And thank you so much for this.
Love to have you back. We'll go through some more of your art, some more books. David Kraemer will have you back, maybe, you know, teaching as well. And Marcia, thank you for the introduction. Much appreciated. We get many of our great speakers from you guys. So thank you. That's how we never would have done this program without Marcia. So I wanted to thank Marcia.
Marcia is amazing. Thank you.
I think Marcia lives near David, right? Or something, because she told me she knocks on your door.
You're 4 floors up.
She told me. She emailed me. She said, I'm going to go upstairs. I'll knock on David's door.
Exactly.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Rochelle Ambersound says wonderful. And she's a tough lady. She's a tough artist to impress. So that means it was exemplary. Wonderful. And I thought so as well. Take care, everybody. Be safe. See you this week. If not, have a great Pesach and a meaningful Pesach. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.